dictating repayment terms, bullying foreign governments into submission. Final act was the multinational corporations coming in and, like vultures on a dead carcass, dividing up the booty for 100% profit. Another book that is closer to home, but which few people remember the story anyway, and even fewer people understand what really went down behind the scenes, is the good old U.S. heartland kind of stuff. The commonly heard terms, well, to most, was Iran-Contra, and President Ronald Reagan took the heat for what had been going on under his watch. But the reality was, as with all other presidents or prime ministers all over the world, that he was just a middle manager in a much larger scheme of control and corruption. The book, if you can find a copy, is called Compromised: Clinton, Bush, and the CIA by Terry Reid. Reid was a high-end machinist and a small aircraft manufacturer. He had an operation in Mexico who took on the manufacturing of arms from China, converting low-quality rifles to high-end automatic military rifles that were traded through CIA contracts to the Contras of Nicaragua, all under the watch of Manuel Noriega, military leader of Panama. All of this was integrally involved in the cocaine smuggling operation of the CIA, which operated out of Colombia with the American connection, of course, remote airport in Mena, Arkansas, under the watchful eye of Billy Clinton and his associate, George Bush Sr., at that time, then Vice President, under Reagan, and George Bush Jr., future President and then low-level manager of the growing Bush Empire. At this point, some people are probably gasping. Yes, you're heralded leaders involved in drug trafficking and prostitution at the highest levels. And remember Ronald Reagan's wife with her Just Say No campaign for kids on drugs? Yes, indeed. While Ronnie, her husband, and his associates were all involved in the largest of all hard drug smuggling operations using U.S. military and private Navy and Air Force that spanned the globe, including a connection to Mideast and Iran and Britain. Just one last word, kind of personal note. I did not have to read about the incidents, as I had seen and heard many of these operations, well, especially in Los Angeles, by financial institutions, all associated with World Bank entities and venture capital groups, still owned by these guys, that manufactured operations all for the military industrial banking complex. But as a first view in real-world education, that defense industry is a complex and extremely corrupt industry, and that it owned and operated by the families of the international bankers brokered from Europe with what they call old money. And we are talking really, really, really old money here. Then try the following bit from a piece of book, if these have not grabbed your attention yet, called Offshore. The book is by an author, William Breton Catalan, that takes you inside international corporations that operate in small foreign countries, receiving tax-free status, operating without any regulations or oversight. Many of these corporations dwarf economies of entire states, entire nations. They move their holdings in secret bank accounts and control natural resources, timber, wood, oil, and water. But as one of my listeners said, until you reach the heart of the matter and identify the real people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, you are just blowing smoke. And since the large corporations, these structures are just buffers for a much more sinister group of people. I always say that if you see the people and know their names, they are not the top dogs. They are just marionettes that are allowed to function for their own profit and greed as long as they further the overall operations of the people at the very top. Anyone in this game knows that they are dispensable at a moment's notice, so they play the game and take their winnings. The rule, as with the KGB, is you never turn your back on your superior. A subordinate clause is that you never try to climb back over the back of your superior. Something Hillary Clinton did not understand and was whisked from winning the presidential bid to a much weaker but obedient understudy, Barack Obama. With this simple rule, as with an honor among thieves, the game continues. Few people understand that the CIA is the police force of the international bankers and the World Bank, a user-friendly name for one of the most corrupt entities on the face of this world. CIA, of course, does not have many diligent agents working hard, although imagining they are fighting international terrorism or some ghost in the closet. But overall operation is to manipulate the entire world for the benefit of the world controllers who operate through the auspices of an institution that loans money. The only problem is that they have no more money than you or I. They have, for hundreds of years, created fiat out of thin air, but not the fiat that worked, the kind that's backed by nothing. And through their international police forces, of course, enforcing their dictates. A man named John Fitzgerald Kennedy tried to dissolve the CIA and extradite the European bank in the U.S. known as the Fed. And we all know what happened to him. Yes, they are very serious about their money, which gives them the thing they really want, and that is control over everything. And there are, of course, hundreds, if not thousands, of years of secret societies here all wrapped up. There have always been wolves in lamb's clothing, pretty literally. For this level, you have to read a book like that of author F. Tupper Saucy, Rulers of Evil, who links all these secret societies with groups like the Illuminati and the Freemasons, but at the tip-top locations in the structure, which again is built on layers to extend into every fabric of your life, are families. About 80 in total, that have 6,000 members who literally operate the world through their financial and banking interests. They own the top oil companies. They manage the international conflicts to maintain their power. They own vast amount of lands all over the world. They live in exclusive private lifestyle that dwarfs what we see as the rich and the famous. But as I said, they've long understood that stealth and secrecy are essential to their existence and to their control. You will never see their names or any trace of them in the news. They also understand, as have all leaders since the beginning of time, that keeping the public ignorant of science is an essential element of control. This is why tremendous amounts of money and support are moved to Tier 2 level of science that is pawned off on the unsuspecting public as they watch Saturday night or Sunday night football and drink some beer, go to the pub. Death of the masses is not an issue, and they have a fabric of misinformation that we went into yesterday that keeps people in their self-imprisoned mode. But as with any organization, there are those who have killed and maneuvered their way to the top. Behind Rothschild banking operation is the organization that was controlling all of Europe and England and Russia long before the Western world was opened up by Columbus's famous banking voyage. That organization is the Catholic Church, centered in the Vatican of Rome. They sanctioned royal marriages, told kings when they could have wars and with whom, and when they could not have wars. Not many moves were made without papal approval from the Holy See. But something strange happened as a group known as the Jesuits took control and still maintained the absolute control of the Vatican. Vast riches stolen from the Americas by the Spanish and the English all found its way into the coffers of the Rothschild banks as they control the Bank of London and Spain and every other country in Europe, for that matter. They managed the politics of Russia. And when it was time to replace the Tsars, it was the Rothschild financial group. They supported both the Reds and the Whites during the Revolution, and finally tipped the scale of financial support in favor of the Bolsheviks, the Reds, to establish the reigning leadership that has dominated Russia until this present day. It is also the same entity that the United States of America's first 13 colonies revolted against, and under pain of certain death, broke bonds and established a new country based on individual freedoms from European banks. The Jesuit operated international banking monopoly that also ran the Bank of England and made the king, who he was, a Rothschild appointee via marriage and takeover. However, it was a short stint, because by 1913 the international bankers were again knocking at the door of the fledgling republic and installed their bank via the Federal Reserve Bank, along with the constitutionally outlawed personal taxation, and followed shortly thereafter with the endless string of wars and blood and mayhem that brings us to where we are today. This, of course, is the short version, but if you would like the long version, we do have the archives up, turtleislandnews.info, and help yourself. 3 very long shows starting from Monday, and I hope it wasn't too dry and boring for you guys. I know it gets long. But natural resource mongering here is the next phase of control. Back when it was timber and iron ore, the Morgan-based reserve mining operation reads like a standard textbook story of what you would read about a third world country. The Mesabi brother had discovered vast amounts of iron ore near the surface in the north central wilderness of, an area state of Minnesota. Unable to get the ore to the market, they approached the Morgan banking interests to fund the train and the rail construction project from the mines to the coast of Lake Superior. Morgan funded the project, but at the last minute withheld crucial monies, and the Mesabi brothers went belly up. Guess who was there to pick up pieces of the financial empire? None other than good old J.P. Morgan, which we said was owned by the Rothschilds. Oddly enough, he called his new enterprise reserve mining. Sounds a lot like Federal Reserve, does it not? And well, just 3 short years later, World War I broke out. Reserve mining had its first big customer. This was followed by World War II, and after that,